Hey guys, Manga here, and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to draw a fantasy cityscape background using my own comic pages as a model to teach you. I know a lot of you guys will be interested in seeing this kind of stuff, so here it is. And I will say this is probably the most detailed cityscape background drawing I've ever done, so I think it's good that I'm sharing it with you guys as well. For more of this stuff, again, like this video, subscribe, hit that bell so you stay notified, and let's get into it. So here, I'm going to break it down into two parts. I'm going to talk more about the technical aspects of things, and then after I'm going to talk about things to look out for. Here, that dot is representative of the vanishing point, and as you can see, there are several parts, especially for stuff that I'm about to do. Here, we're going to have a lot of the buildings underneath the vanishing point, and you can have it above. It just depends on how tall they are, on where you're looking from, and what the horizon is. So the line that goes across is the horizon line. What we have here is actually two panels joined together, but it's actually a double spread, and there's a way I'm doing this double spread page, but just to not make things too complicated, I wouldn't go into too much detail about that. The key things to just know here are that this is 2-point perspective, and for this tutorial to work, I'm expecting you to already have a decent idea of how 2-point perspective and 3-point perspective works. Just so we have our bases covered, this is 2-point perspective for the most part. 3-point perspective would be another point at the bottom, and that would just be it'll be for the lines that are more vertical. Obviously there isn't necessarily a vertical or horizontal one. The horizontal one is the most horizon line, but that's the 90-degree, like it's the perfect horizontal line there that's just representative of your eye level, and it's called the horizon line. But when it comes to the vanishing points, I'm using 2-point, but in this case I'm freestyling where the other vanishing point is. I'm extra accurate on just one of them, and that's the one that's actually on the panel. That's the one we can actually see. If it's 3-point perspective, there'll be another one usually at the bottom that you would use for the lines that are a little more vertical. And in this case, you can argue that the illustration I'm doing is 3-point perspective, and I am winging that as well, but less so. Again, moving forward, I'm assuming just a little bit that you guys have some degree of an understanding of how 2-point perspective, 1-point perspective, and 3-point perspective actually works. And if you guys actually need that, then maybe in the future I'll make a video that's specifically on that. But you need to have like at least a decent understanding of how they work in order to truly grasp what I'm talking about here. And when it comes to things to look out for from a visual standpoint, because again, this video is not necessarily going to touch on too much about how the world building would work. That's kind of something you need to figure out even before you start doing this illustration. Like, what type of fantasy world are you building? How does everything operate? Are parts of the city broken down into like an urban area and a rural area? Is it more like mountains? Like, are there mountains in the back? And here you will see mountains in the back, and there's going to be like a silhouette technique I'll do at the end, towards the end, that you will see. But as it goes, mountains, are some parts going to have forts, parks, whatever? Are there some major recognizable buildings or landmarks? You need to figure that out, and that's kind of part of you understanding your story and really understanding the location overall. In some cases, understanding the geography of what you've created. Is there like and those landmarks and buildings could, include exits or entrances of this city, district, whatever it is. The culture and religion and all that kind of stuff, history would help also dictate how those work. Here you can see almost like a little silhouette in the back that just is further away. The further away the buildings are, the less detailed they're going to be, right? So in this case, where you have buildings so far, those buildings are slightly above the horizon line. They're so far away that they don't have to be so detailed, so it's just buildings over buildings, and they can overlap with each other a little bit, but you will see how I'm going to tone them towards the end to have everything make a whole lot more sense. But again, going back to what I was talking about, where you need to understand the world and some of the building designs, and where you get the reference from could be dictated by the temperature of the place, transportation, telecommunication, the ideology or philosophies of how this world is put together, and it'll help you decide on what references to use. So in my cases, I use I reference a lot of photos, reference a lot of real life, and the world that I've built here it's an island, so I know water is going to play a major role in the building, in like the setting and just the overall look from this view. And as you can see, I have like a little stream river thing there that just shows that, you know, that's part of this world. And maybe the water also plays into how electricity works. So that's something to think about as well. Most of these are things that you would kind of figure it out during your world building phase. But, you know, some of them I can just drop a couple tips and tricks for the visual aspect of things. So here, you really need to have a decent understanding of how, you know, roofs will look and the variety of roofs that you want to include in this setting. For what I have, like I said, it's like an island, but again, some of the buildings have that sense of capitalism, but again, this sense of like old school feeling. Some of the buildings have references and inspiration from more cathedral style buildings or more old school Italian facade, Baroque period type buildings. So it's really a melting pot of that and just building ideas that I have in my head. Buildings from, like, you know, old England, Victoria England type structures, or, you know, more fantasy series and how those series put their buildings together, like say a Harry Potter or a fairy tale, and taking tips and tricks from there, where you can see some pointy roofs, some castle-like figures in the back. You can see in the silhouette, more parallel to the horizon line, and that's kind of like what we're putting together. Another tip is the windows. Usually if you have like small windows, those windows being so small indicate how big that shape is. And if you have a lot of windows, a lot of black dots that are indicating the window, it just kind of lets you know how far away you are from that building. But and it also gives a vibe of, you know, distance, depth, and you can do really cool things. And obviously with windows that are much closer, you have to add more detail to them, but you can actually do more creative stuff with the designs of the windows. So I recommend looking at reference of specific things, of specific buildings, of specific windows, roofs, of your favorite series that inspire you to create the world that you're creating, or whether they be real life locations that inspire it as well. So you need to figure all of that out, or at least have a very strong understanding of how those look before you start drawing. You see some roofs here, they even have like a pool, so there's some rich people here as well. And you can even cut it to where some parts of this city have some more rural, shorter, smaller buildings that are more where people live, and these other things could represent whatever you want them to represent. Some of the shapes of the buildings, before I even add detail to them, are very unorthodox, so that also kind of gives me room to just, when I'm adding detail, just do creative stuff. So a lot of it is, yes, reference, but a lot of it is also, you know, freestyle to a degree. But you want to be consistent in that freestyle so that the buildings in this city don't look like they don't belong together, unless that is the theme. And maybe it's representative of the fact that maybe the city is a clashing of styles, or a clashing of cultures, or a clashing of whatever. But you need to think about that greatly before you jump in. Some of the influence could also be you looking at other series and seeing how they execute their buildings, how they shade the buildings, how they do cracks, or for buildings that are older, or buildings that are newer, windows, how do they tone that, you know. See and develop your style. So this comes even after you've developed your style as well, but it's also good to see what other creators are doing and how they shade buildings and how they do the line work for it and things like that. Those are actually very beneficial as well. Here I have, again, it's an island. There are aspects of it that have mountains. It's obviously it's an island, so surrounded by water and all that kind of stuff, so that plays a role in how the city runs as well. And then there's some tiny buildings, kind of like satellites in the sky that float, so that's also selling the idea at first glance that there is a supernatural aspect to this world. There are aspects of this world that have, again, a lot of recognizable buildings and landmarks. So there is a building in the middle of the city. Anytime you draw it, you're kind of giving the viewer where they are, but again, a sense of what part of the city they're in. Towards the top right, you can see like an arc. And it's more like this really black ball that is connected to all the satellites in the sky. It plays a role in how the city is run from a technological standpoint. I got some trees, I got some, poles, electric poles and wires going around. There's a lot of imagery that helps unify the whole city, almost like a flag that represents the whole country, or maybe this particular part of the city that's uniform on some buildings, to kind of indicate that as well, indicate what the readers are looking at, what place they're actually looking at. So the list goes on. You want to have a good understanding of your style, what is acceptable in your style, and then you want to have a good understanding of the world that you're building. And obviously here, now that we're inking, I will use freehand for some of the curves. Again, I'm not trying to be too accurate. It depends on your style. And I'll also use freehand for parts of the illustration that are more, you know, organic, like trees, or maybe I'm drawing like wires, or something that curves in a very unusual way. And then for the lines that require me to be a little more accurate, I'll use a ruler for those. Some things you can do is basically go around the whole illustration and draw as many of the horizontal lines as you can, and then do the same thing now all over again, but now you're focusing on the more vertical lines, and you can use your eyes to wing whatever that means and just be consistent. And then overall, then you start to just fill in the gaps of anything you missed. You want to make sure that things are organized. Again, even though I'm not trying to be 100% accurate, there are things that I just know that have to be in order, right? So if I'm drawing a bunch of windows that are on the same level, I want to make sure that there is a parallel feeling to that. So I use the ruler to draw a line that I know is going to be parallel to another line. I don't lift up the ruler, I just get it done, right? But for the most part, this is just tracing, and me using the ruler to just make some of the sketches that I've already done look more accurate. And that's what I'm doing for the most part, as you can see. And then after that, I scan in my work into Manga Studio. If you're using Photoshop, that's up to you. You can use that as well. Here, those lines, if you're curious, those colored lines, the blue, the red, and the yellow, are just lines to indicate and tell me that, okay, no important artwork or text goes in there. And it just lets me know what I'm doing for the most part, in how I'm going to place what I've imported in. This is not a video where I go into detail on how to use Clip Studio, but if you see certain things here that you want to learn about how, like what I'm doing to tone this city, you can just leave it in the comments, and I'll be happy to answer your questions if you have any questions, or point you in the right direction, because I do have videos on toning, and if you have a good grasp on how to tone, you'll be able to do some of the stuff I'm doing here. And now I'm just putting in the cloud. I'm giving the overall city a tonal feel, not making it feel too flat. That's why I'm using a gradient rather than just a flat thing. And then I'm toning aspects of the roofs, buildings, parts that I want to have toned. I'm using some tone to indicate shading rather than using lines to shade. In some cases I would use lines, but if the building is further away, I might not use lines. I might just use tone to shade that, or I might just use flat black to just go over the parts that are supposed to be shaded. I'm also cleaning up any errors that I feel I've made from an artistic standpoint with the line work, and just making everything look a little more accurate as I can make it look. And in some cases I'm even using Clip Studio to add more lines to make everything look more organized, more like what I want, because maybe there are some cases where I actually forgot to ink some things because there's so much going on. But yeah, then I have that, you know, I'm erasing parts of the overall tone I put on the whole city. I'm erasing parts of it to indicate that light is hitting parts of the building. It just makes everything look a little more realistic, and you see a whole lot more what I'm talking about. Here I'm putting a gradient for the water, and then putting some extra lines to let it feel more like water. So erasing some parts, putting shade in some parts. Here, again, putting some tone where I feel it's necessary to put some tone, because if I don't put the tone in there, then everything, all the lines, there's so many lines that you can be overwhelmed and not really focus on anything. It just looks like a bunch of lines, and it still looks good, but it could look much better. I'm putting some gradients for some windows because it just gives that feeling of glass. Again, I'm using some shading tone to do shadows rather than relying just on the lines. And that's what I'm doing for this whole illustration until I feel it's done. And to be honest, you can work on it and work on it and work on it as long as you can, as long as you have time for it, but you can only do your best. But here you see me, especially for the silhouettes of the buildings at the back that's forming the silhouettes at the back, I'm erasing parts of it just to indicate that lights is hitting some parts and lights not hitting some other parts. And voila! Please, if you like this video, give it a like. United States, smash that subscribe button and hit that bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. It helps a great deal, and you can support this channel that way. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know. This page is actually the first page, or double spread page, in Apple Black Volume 3. And you can read more of the pages of Apple Black Volume 3 in Saturday AM issue 95. And you know, if you have no clue what Apple Black is, I'm the creator of Apple Black, published and serialized on Saturday AM. You can read the first 6 chapters for free, even though I will be like remastering those pages a little bit, and that was part of what the Kickstarter that we just got funded for was about. And I'd like to thank you guys for us being funded. We actually raised 11 grand, even though we asked for 10, a little over 11 grand actually. So I'd like to thank you guys for all the support. Apple Black Volume 1 and 2 are available. All the links you could possibly need will be in the description, including my social media and all that good stuff. Instagram, my Facebook is kind of blowing up low-key right now, so y'all can check that out. I'm trying to get into Twitch. It's a little difficult, but I'll get into Twitch pretty soon, and there's more news coming. But I'd like to thank you guys. Check out Saturday AM, check out Apple Black. Please answer the question of the day. You can get 2 free months of Skillshare using the links in the description. Thanks for watching, guys. This is Whyt Manga, and I'm out.